Well, there's been growing concern about the lack of a comprehensive Whistleblower Protection Act. Activists say this has led to whistleblowers forced into hiding or, at worst, getting killed. They're now calling for the Department of Justice to adopt the Draft Protection and Support of Whistleblowers Bill. And this was then drafted by civil society organizations to plug the gap, they say, that government has failed to for years. Let's discuss this even further now. We're joined by Advocate Tseliso Thipanyane from the Southern African Institute for Responsive and Accountable Governance, as well as Professor Mary de Haas from the KZN Violence Monitor. Advocate, Prof, thank you both for your time and good afternoon to you. Advocate, let me just start with you. I mean, with your experience with the work that you do in law, why in 2023 are we still having this conversation, a conversation around the protection of whistleblowers? We have seen the amount of contribution they have made to the likes of the Zondo Commission. We have seen in PRASA, in Transnet, PIC, the Gauteng Department of Health during the COVID-19 pandemic, the amount of contribution they've made in exposing rot and corruption, much to some losing their lives, some having to go into hiding, yet still there isn't sufficient, adequate protection for whistleblowers.
Sorry, I missed the first part.
Advocate, it was for Advocate Thipanyane. If you can hear me, Advocate,
yeah.
This question was directed to you, Advocate. Maybe perhaps unmute yourself if you have. Advocate Tseliso Thipanyane.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, I thought it was for Mary. Yeah, look, it's actually a serious concern for us in the sense that, you know, there is a commitment by government to fight corruption, and we have to fight corruption. And yet we have a law here, despite these challenges and weaknesses, which is meant to protect whistleblowers who play a major role in exposing corruption. And that's why we're really concerned about the continued victimization of whistleblowers, especially by organs of state, while on the other hand, we want to fight corruption. And that's why I'm basically calling on the president to make sure that, one, that, you know, that we end the victimization of whistleblowers by government departments and officials. We also support whistleblowers. We also then improve the legal framework to enable a conducive environment for whistleblowing in our country.
Right. Prof, perhaps you want to also add your voice to this. I mean, because you took it a step further. You wrote an open letter to Minister Ron Lamola expressing your frustration with the amount of, you know, killings that we're seeing against activists, against whistleblowers, the lack of protection. You have even went as far as, which we'll address in just a moment, some of the demands you make in your open letter. Take me through why you wrote this letter, why it was so important for you, Prof.
Okay, right. Well, for the last year, Patricia Mashale has been in hiding. It's a mixture of, under apartheid, this would have been a kind of solitary confinement come Haas arrest, but in hiding from the very people who should be protecting her, which are the police, just because she did the right thing in terms of her oath of office, anti-corruption legislation. She wrote to the National Commissioner, which was the thing to do, made a protected disclosure, fingering Free State management in corruption. And the Free State management fought back, have harassed her family. Her family's under 24-hour surveillance with our taxpayers' money. She is in fear of her life. She survived 2 threats to her life. And it's madness. How can this happen? And the very people, crime intelligence, which are supposed to be stopping people getting killed by hitmen before they're killed, that's their job, they're not doing it. They are deployed now to track her down. But it gets worse. And that's why I wrote this to the I wrote this letter to, and I'd written to the National Director of Public Prosecutions. There is credible evidence that prosecutions in the Free State are colluding with police. There are marriage relationships between senior prosecutors and police. There's a story that they are bringing, do you know, what they're doing is they're abusing taxpayers' money by bringing cases, and they're abusing court time. 3 police have gone to the family court to get protection orders against people who are exposing corruption. And on Friday, in the latest one, It wasn't the court that delivered it. It was a policeman with an R5 that went to the family home to deliver a court order with Mashale in hiding. Imagine what this does to a child in that home. The rights of the child have been grossly violated, and the crime intelligence are there to track her down. There's a car outside the home for 24 hours. Why is this being allowed? And to make matters worse, as I said, there is credible evidence, because it's not just Mashale, it's other people that the police are maliciously dismissing for doing their work properly because they're a threat to people actually appointed through nepotistic networks who are incompetent. So they get rid of good people, including a forensic social worker with years of experience. That was the one in Shackles. In Shackles. And the Bloemfontein Magistrate Court.
Perhaps let me bring in Advocate Tseliso Thipanyane to this, Prof, if you may allow me. Just allow me to bring the good Advocate Tseliso into this. How concerning is it to hear that there are indeed credible reports that the Justice Department employees in this particular case, and I'm assuming that there might be similar case and of accusations of collusion, whether involving the police, involving the Justice Department. This at the back end, Advocate, of the President promising during his State of the Nation address that he will do all he can to assist whistleblowers, but the very same officials that he entrusts to implement the work to ensure that whistleblowers are protected are accused of being part of the problem.
Well, this is indeed the problem. I mean, a lot of whistleblowers who are being victimized, they are being victimized by state officials using public officials. And that's why we're saying, can the president, in his undertaking to fight corruption, issue a directive that there should be no victimization of whistleblowers at the hands of state officials using public funds. Number two, we want the president to also issue a directive that whistleblowers must be supported when they fight the acts of injustice, of being victimized for doing the right thing. Because without whistleblowers, we cannot succeed in the fight against corruption. So it makes one wonder, whether some of the people who are involved here are actually not themselves part of the corruption. That's why then we're seeing this resistance to whistleblowing. Well, there's an act of parliament which says whistleblowers must be protected. You have bodies like the Human Rights Commission, which are there to protect the violation of the rights of whistleblowers. But we're not seeing much action in that regard.
Professor Mary de Haas, what would you like to see in terms of action that the Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, take as a matter of urgency?
Well, you will remember that Lamola is part of the executive. I think he probably sits on the State Security Council. You will remember that the Minister of Police was instructed to protect Tseliso Zulu, and he refused to do it. The President told Zulu he would be protected. He was overruled by Clearly. Why is Clearly still Minister of Police? I mean, this is extraordinary. A man who was dismissed in absolute disgrace is the Minister of Police who runs the police, and the President does nothing about it. So you start with that. You start with a policing board, as in the report after Marikana, to do the appointments and promotions. You start with a forensic audit of all senior appointments and a check of qualifications, because most of them are probably fraudulent in many cases. You do that, and then you are getting somewhere. But you start with getting rid of that minister and getting a board in place. And I think it's going to take, they haven't even passed IPIC legislation. There is nothing that provides independent oversight of the police. I think the President should immediately establish a judicial ombuds body, that these complaints can be taken to, that they can move in, they can check. I mean, even tax deductions are being made when people aren't getting salaries. The corruption in the police is unbelievable. I mean, you've just shown, I have been fighting with the border police up at Mbazwana about the cross-border crime for 20 years. 2 weeks ago, the local station in Mbazwana didn't even have a functioning battery. The police, the border posts are living in luxury. The soldiers are letting people through for 50 rand. I mean, this is what's supposed to be happening, not persecuting whistleblowers.
And, you remind me when you talk of the cross-border, criminal activity and syndicates, Prof, that just yesterday when I spoke to Tseliso Thipanyane, our senior reporter, he was talking about the killing, the murder of Judah Mthethwa, gunned down just outside of his house because he had been at the forefront of speaking out against vehicles that have been hijacked in Kwangwanase, out in KwaZulu-Natal, being hijacked and taken to Mozambique. This causing a lot of cross-border, challenges for the community as well as criminal syndicates. And Advocate, I just wonder, when we see incidents like this, where Judah Mthethwa is killed in front of his home, Babita Deokaran gunned down outside of her home just after dropping her child at school. If we don't deal with the matter of a protection bill for whistleblowers, what are the consequences for other whistleblowers who are watching these events take place, people losing their lives, those who are alive losing their quality of life because they have to go in hiding? What message are we sending to those whistleblowers should we not deal with this matter?
We are indeed sending a very wrong message that, it's not okay to be a whistleblower, because many whistleblowers are suffering as we speak. And that's why we're saying we want an inquiry by the president that all the instances of victimization of whistleblowers, especially by the state, must be looked into, and then they must be corrected, because we cannot fight corruption if we continue to victimize whistleblowers. We need them. They are our heroes. They are the defenders of our champion. They are here to make sure that, this country moves in the right direction. So it's actually of utmost importance that whistleblowers are protected. We want the law to be changed, to be improved. We want funds to be there for whistleblowers, but also we want the president to really issue a call that no victimization of whistleblowers. Number two, there must be an immediate investigation of all the victimization of whistleblowers at the hand of the state.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen civil society taking action here, active citizens movement, starting a petition with, many others. Whistleblower protection bill must be made law. That petition garnering much attention. And all our thanks to you, Advocate Tseliso Thipanyane, as well as Professor Mary de Haas from the KZN Violence Monitor, for adding your voice to this issue. Hopefully it will land on the necessary ears that need to make the right decisions to protect South African whistleblowers.